Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on executive presence and the unwritten rules of business etiquette. My name is Eliza Parrish. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at the Raymond A. Mason School of Business at the College of William and Mary. And as many of you know, these webinars are brought to you as a fulfillment of our promise to provide you with lifelong learning opportunities. In preparing for this webinar, I've given thought to why etiquette matters, beyond the obvious, making other people feel comfortable. But in business, manners are an asset. You are more a powerful influencer, and others are far more likely to follow you than to turn from you. Our speaker today, Crystal Bailey, puts the pro in protocol as the director of the Etiquette Institute of Washington. She realized her calling while attending an etiquette seminar at the Hospitality House while a law student at William and Mary. Recognized for her fresh approach, Ms. Bailey is dedicated to helping business and young professionals polish their fine dining and networking savvy. Ms. Bailey specializes in netiquette, where the internet and etiquette collide, and is called on frequently for her expertise by Fortune 500 companies and media outlets, including the BBC, CNN, and ABC News. Ms. Bailey has also participated for 2 years in a professional development course taught by business school professor Catherine Guthrie. The course exposes freshmen to business pathways by giving them an opportunity to interact with fellow alumni in business. She has also mentored a number of our business school students. She received her formal etiquette training at Debrays of London and Etiquette à la Française in Montpellier, France. She is a graduate of Howard University and a 2009 graduate of the William and Mary Law School. Crystal, with thanks, I turn this to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Such a delight to be before you. I'm sure we have a great group here today. Feel free, we want this to be conversational, so if you have questions, send them my way. I'll make sure that we're able to address them either throughout the webinar or at the end. We'll actually have a special Q&A section, so either way will be perfectly fine. And just to start off, I have a question for you. I would like to know, how many of you have heard of Paul Revere? I'm assuming everyone, hands are up everywhere. Now, we all know Paul Revere. The educational system is doing something for us. Now, we know the British are coming, the British are coming. We might even know the whole poem. We've had to memorize it for school. But then I want to ask you, who is William Dawes? Have we heard of William Dawes? Because the two of them, these two gentlemen, were both from Boston. They both were from similar economic backgrounds and class backgrounds. And they were both tasked on April 18th, 1775, to spread the word from village to town to militia that the British were coming. With this tasking, they had 750 square miles to cover, which is a lot on horseback. I think nowadays we could probably just go on Twitter and spread the word quite quickly. But they had to go from town to town, and they had to utilize a network. And if any of you are familiar with The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, then you've heard of the concept of how we should all be Paul Revere's of networking. Not only should we utilize our networks well, knocking on the right doors, going from town to town, and utilizing the proper networks, we don't want to be a William Dawes, who's a bit of a no-name, had the same tasking, but maybe knocked on doors and women came out in their bonnets and ultimately went back to sleep. So as we go through today, especially when we get to the networking portion, I want you to keep that in mind. Being a Paul Revere of networking, not only knocking on the right doors, but doing it with a bit of grace and savvy. And so that's what we're all about here today. I imagine that Paul Revere had a great deal of what we would call executive presence. And so let me give you a quick overview about what we'll talk about. We'll try to define executive presence, and it really is trying. We'll talk about emerging business etiquette trends and some of the things that are changing for us. We'll talk about 7 mistakes that you didn't know you were making. A good portion of our talk today will be about networking and how to really work the room. My favorite topic, netiquette, of course, and anything where technology and etiquette collide, and so that'll be that topic area for us. So, moving along and thinking about the X factor. Now, I've worked with the Miss America organization for over 10 years, either as a contestant or choreographer, and ultimately as a state executive director. And one thing I've been able to find through that experience is that I can watch a pageant and I can see 52 young women on stage and I can tell who has the X factor. Right? I can pick out a winner from that group, and it's not just stage presence. It really is about how you're able to make others feel. And so as we talk about executive presence, maybe that's a good way to think of it, of how do we make others feel? Being on a stage in a swimsuit even, right? The idea is not that you want the attention drawn to the swimsuit, right? It's bringing it to your face and what you have to say. And so in life, we also want to think about it that way, that we want to bring the attention to what we really have to say, and that all of the exterior really shouldn't matter. So in thinking of the X factor, we also want to understand that it really is about our ability to change and grow with expectations. And so our expectations in the office, in the workplace, and socially are changing. If I think about reading, Amy Vanderbilt's Etiquette book or Emily Post, some of those things will still apply, of course, but many things have changed. And so we'll talk about the emerging trends that we're seeing today. And I'd like to introduce you to this emerging trend, which is Generation Z. Generation Z, now, if you can believe it, born in the mid-90s, and they're actually coming out of college now, so they will be in your workplace. And if you thought you had enough of millennials, well, here comes Generation Z. And so they bring with them their own needs, but also their own skills, which I think are great and something that we should be able to incorporate and be open to incorporating. Now, they have not known life without mobile phones. They would see a typewriter and be, confused as to what that is. AOL dial-up would be something, a hideous noise for them to hear, and then certainly even a suitcase without wheels would be a foreign object to them. They really are a unique generation that has had technology and social media before them, but it doesn't mean it's something that we cannot utilize or learn from. And so being very open to this generation, as well as the millennial generation, I think is important. Over 4 generations now are in the workplace, and so that's one of the unique things I think that we have to really build our etiquette skills around, that there are expectations from each specific generation. And I think about recently instant messaging with what I will call a Generation Zer, and she would constantly just jump in first thing in the morning without a greeting, without a good morning or anything like that. And I think for young people, that might really be the thing, that they're comfortable with just jumping into conversation. And so I would always reach back with a good morning, just to give her the idea that generations that are different than hers might have an expectation for you to greet and to speak. And speaking is a big thing that I think we should all think about. It creates a democratic environment in a workplace. It's also helpful if you have to ask someone something later on in the day, making sure that you always say good morning to people and to speak. So something I had to impart to a young woman of Generation Z. But they do have a global perspective, which I think is really unique, that social media has allowed them to, where we might have had pen pals overseas and waited for someone to write back for months, they're able to instant message or direct message with people via social media and have that connection. And so they're going to have a greater reach. So an exciting thing to think about, but really be open to our upcoming Generation Z as they come into your workplace, maybe as interns this summer. Now, some of you may recognize my friend Matt here from Where the Hell is Matt? All right, and this was from the early 2000s, where this gentleman would go all around the world and dance a jig and post videos on YouTube. He's become a bit of a meme himself. I don't want you to become a meme, though, when you're thinking about telecommuting and teleworking. And we shouldn't have to ask, well, where the heck is such and such all the time? So thinking about that when we are working from home, that you want to make sure that you're accountable, that people know where you are, know what to expect and how to get in touch with you, even though you may not be in the office. Now, you might think this is a bit of a typo, but it really is work from work, because nowadays, while the trend in the early 2000s was for us to all be working from home, or to at least have a day or two out of the week to do so, it's now on trend for companies and organizations to bring their workers back in. And so recently, Michelle Peluso from IBM stated, there's something about a team being more powerful, more impactful, more creative, and frankly, hopefully, having more fun when they are shoulder to shoulder. Now, everyone at IBM is not excited about the news of having to relocate or move back into a real office space, and some will leave, of course, but they're also bringing in a good number of individuals. And so something to think about when we are fortunate enough to be able to telecommute at times or meet virtually, are we making sure that we are using all of the things that are around us to really impart our executive presence? And so we'll talk just a little bit about that now. And virtual meetings. Now, how many of you have been on a conference call and you've been doing everything from vacuuming to holding the baby? I know I do. We all try to multitask and to get a lot done with virtual meetings, but let's keep a few things in mind. One is to arrive early, and even if I have to end up being on a call, 10 minutes beforehand, at least I know I'm on, because there's nothing more annoying than having your speaker to constantly say, well, who just joined the call? Who just joined the call? As they're going throughout and speaking. So I try to jump on early, recognizing that time is money. Another big thing is making sure that you are following an agenda. So even for a virtual meeting, making sure that you're going by that agenda, because it's going to keep you moving along. It's also going to be very helpful for your participants to know where they should plug in and to even know if they need to be on this particular call or be in the meeting. Introducing yourself. So every time I have something to say, since I don't have the voice of James Earl Jones that's world recognized, I know that I need to say, this is Crystal here, and I'd just like to add, and so I'll do that as I'm speaking, as opposed to just jumping in with something to say and assuming that everyone will recognize my voice. Not using it as your lunch hour, I think, is a big one for me. We were talking a little bit earlier here about crunching and sounds that food can make. And so definitely if you're going to be on a call and not on mute, thinking about not using that as your lunch hour. It's so easy to be distracted, to multitask, to be watching YouTube videos or anything else while you're on either a call or in a virtual meeting. So really focusing in, for me, is helpful, and I think it makes the meeting far more productive. And then finally, I think of referring to others by name, and going back to my church upbringing, our pastor would constantly call someone out. He'd call my dad out and say, Charles, do you hear what I'm saying? And you might have to do that on a conference call as well to make sure that people are engaged and know that you're expecting feedback and responses for them so that it's not just a one-sided meeting. All right. Now, this is one of my favorite episodes of Seinfeld, where Elaine's boss, Mr. Pitts, ends up eating Snickers bars with a fork and a knife. And George took to this, and it became a thing all over New York to eat your Snickers bars, candies, donuts, cookies even, with a fork and knife. Not necessarily the right thing to do. Sometimes we're making mistakes and we don't even know it. Maybe it does seem kind of classy, though, to eat a Snickers bar with a fork and knife. I'll try it. So the first mistake I want to talk about is confusing chivalry with civility. And when I think of chivalry, right, I'm thinking of knights in shining armor. I'm thinking of Ichabod here, throwing his cloak over a puddle to help the damsel in distress. And we have to have an understanding that in the workplace, we're really looking for civility. And so that's being good to your common man, woman, boy, or girl. There are certain things that I would not expect from a supervisor or a peer at work to do that I might expect in a social setting. So, for example, pulling out a chair or helping me with my jacket. You might get a bit of a look from me, or maybe a little Melania hand swipe. If that happens in the workplace. But in a social setting, right, I'd be quite comfortable with it. And so if you do see someone struggling, for example, if I'm struggling just to get my arm into my jacket for 10 minutes, maybe ask, can I help you? And that's a good way to break the ice and just be sure that that person in a workplace is comfortable with you extending something that would be considered a little more chivalrous without coming off as being demeaning. Now, civility. Civility is depicted beautifully here, right, by this gentleman who is just happy to help his fellow friend in his F-150, I suppose, not get attacked by this alligator. Not sure why this is all happening or why he's not in the truck. But when I think about civility, I want to think about it this way. And George Washington had a wonderful set of rules of civility that was published. And those things still stand true today. I could read any of the 100 plus rules and they would make complete sense, which includes, not chewing with your mouth full, not gossiping. Of course, it's phrased in a bit of a different way, but check those out if you ever get a chance. George Washington's Rules of Civility. Those are the things that really will stand the test of time, whereas chivalry changes and shifts. Our expectations are different. Now, I will say that the idea of the elevator is something that still sticks with me. And that also brings us back to the idea that we have so many different generations in a workplace, right? And so I will tell a millennial or Generation Zer to make sure that you're allowing ladies on and off the elevators first, because while your generation may not have that expectation, your supervisors or those higher up the chain may have that. And if they don't see that and they don't see some of those small little things, then maybe they don't want to bring you on or include you in things because you seem a bit uncivilized. Now, the elevator thing is a big one for me, but I do certainly see even etiquette professionals saying that now, men or women can let themselves on. But for me, I'm going to ask you to still hold on for just a little bit longer with letting women on and off of the elevator first. All right, another mistake, ignoring the tornado, or shall we say the elephant in the room, and talking politics. So during this election cycle, I was called in by a number of news agencies to talk about how do you cover politics, whether it be, around family or in the workplace. And nowadays, it's really interesting to see that about 37% of individuals have actually talked about politics with their supervisors or their bosses. And I think in the past that would not have been the thing. Politics has really become a topic that's acceptable in many circumstances. And what we'll find is that we kind of get ourselves or trip ourselves up when we are bringing it up, even though it's more common. So here's a good little quote of, speaking of pink slips in Washington, I better get to work, right? I'm slammed. That might be a good way to deflect or to pivot the conversation. Or I'll think of saying fake news. The only fake news here is that we don't have, this presentation ready or something like that. I'm always looking for a way to pivot that conversation or to let someone know you really don't want to get into that right now. Because while you think everyone may be on your side or share your opinion, you just never know, and it can make for very uncomfortable circumstances. So still a rule for us to go by, which is not talking about politics, or at least avoiding it, if we at least have to acknowledge it. Now, we find that 87% of employees are reading political and social media posts during work. 73% of us have talked with our colleagues about politics since this election, and 29% of workers say they are less productive since the election. Not good numbers at all. So keep that in mind. Be willing to move and to pivot. Don't be the guy or the gal that brings it up all the time with every conversation, even though, I realize TV news is on right in our office now. And so that brings up a lot for us. And it's kind of difficult, especially in Washington for me, when a lot of my clients are in the realm of politics. And for me to tell them don't talk politics, that's like I'm going against the grain completely. And so just being aware of your audience, I think, is the big thing to take away with regards to politics nowadays. Now, RSVP is supposed to stand for Répondez, s'il vous plaît, please respond. But for many of us, it is please respond when you feel like it, the day of the event, if nothing better comes up and I have to arrive late and leave early. Just let us know whether you're going to be there or not, and not change your RSVP. And so I think e-invitations has kind of been the thing that has made us feel very, very comfortable with changing our RSVP for events. It does not mean that you can just change the day of the event and not let your host know, and not really have a circumstance for why you cannot attend. So thinking about that and RSVPing, you want to make sure also that if your name, and this is a bit of an aside, but I think wedding etiquette is important too. If your name is not on an invitation, or if you don't have a guest on your invitation, then it's just for you. So for example, if my invitation simply says William, then it's just William. If it says William and Mary, then Mary is invited. If it says William and guest, hey, bring Mary along. Now if it says William and Mary and, with and Marshall, maybe, right? Then I know I can bring the kids too. So never wanting to ask if you can bring a guest or bring your children if that has not been stated by your host, in particular for wedding etiquette. Taking this to the office, though, I want to think about, especially for my clients that are dating, I always tell them, be careful about who you're bringing to the company picnic or barbecue, right? That each time that you have an event, you maybe don't want to be bringing in someone new because that might translate to my view of you in a professional setting too. So be thoughtful about that as you're inviting others to your work functions. Upspeak. So upspeak is like when you have a question with everything that you have to say, right? It can come off a bit valley girlish, but we're not going to say that only women do this. And I think both men and women can be guilty of upspeak and a lot of other annoying habits. One thing I also want us to think of is how we introduce ourselves and making sure that we're speaking clearly and enunciating even our name. So a lot of times we have trouble remembering names, right? And I don't think it gets any easier as we get older. But one thing that might help others, and certainly you can do to help them, is to enunciate your name and to slow down just a bit. So instead of me saying Crystal Bailey, I'm going to go Crystal, take a slight pause, and then Bailey going down. So I'm going up with Crystal, taking a pause, and then going down as if to give a period or an end to that with Bailey, but letting you know that there are two separate parts to my name. And it just brings me to a good point of making sure that you use your first and last name when you are introducing yourself. And I say to do that in both social and professional settings. Now, a few other things that might be annoying: vocal fry, right? Also considered the Kardashian effect. So we might not notice it in ourselves, and you may notice it in other people, but just being aware of vocal fry, and it's almost sitting, in your voice this way. I know it's kind of difficult to let someone know that they're doing vocal fry, but maybe the next time you hear it, you can point it out in, the Kardashian show, and then that person might be able to catch on. Whispering is also another one that really kind of gets me. Making sure that you're speaking at a good tone that everyone can hear you at. Which, on the other end, of course, yelling, there are those that yell and kind of drive you crazy. So I see we have a question from Paula, and it's very, very on point with vocal fry. And that vocal fry is really sitting in your voice, kind of this way.
Make it more pronounced, I think.
Okay, Paula. So this is kind of like vocal fry. And hopefully that's giving it to you a little bit. Okay, completely understood. It's not fun to do, and I don't think it's good for your voice either. But it's been attributed more so to females and younger generations. And again, I don't think it's just something that younger generations do or females. And it does take away from your credibility. And so that's the issue with vocal fry. Thank you. Absolutely. The Kardashian effect. Thanks, Donna. All right. So, right, all of those things, again, taking away from our credibility. So things you really, really want to be aware of when you're speaking. I think. We know what you think. I do it a lot as well. But go ahead into what you want to say without saying I think and prefacing everything with I think. It's coming from your mouth, so we get the point. And again, failing to enunciate, just very, very important, and being conscious of it. If you're not sure, record yourself and get a good listen. I know some of us hate listening to our voices, so you might also want to get a good friend who can help you out with that as well. My grandmother always said, that went out of style with high button boots. Okay, one of my favorite quotes of hers. So my question to you is, are business cards passé? Are they out of style? I wouldn't think so. I go to networking events all the time, and of course, I run into people and they tell me, oh, well, just find me on LinkedIn, right? Business cards to me are still very, very important. They're a tangible representation of you, and the way that we exchange business cards says a lot. There are also a great deal of cultural sensitivities, especially for Asian cultures, right? If I'm traveling to Japan, or Southeast Asia, I want to be very, very aware of how I'm exchanging business cards, making sure that I have enough cards, and it's not enough to say, find me on LinkedIn. And so things that I have taken into account is making sure that I'm exchanging business cards with both hands. I'm also going to take a moment to look at your card. I'll comment, supply chain management, fascinating, tell me more, or whatever field you're in. I might find something on your card to comment about. I always say, you're not trying to go into a room and just make it rain business cards, right? Just giving out business cards willy-nilly. My thought is that I want to be able to make strong, meaningful connections with individuals. I'm also not trying to trick or treat for cards and say, can I have your card? Can I have your card? As I go around the room. Me offering a business card to someone really means that I want to connect with them. And the appropriate way or the etiquette of it all is actually to ask someone, how can we keep in touch? That way they have the option of offering their business card to you, and you'll receive it that way and then exchange. We really shouldn't just kind of flick our card out to someone in conversation, and certainly not run up to someone during the middle of a networking event and just toss a card their way. I want you to keep your cards pristine, and for me, I keep them everywhere. I mean, every binder, billfold, wallet, every part of my car, I have a number of cards just so that I know I always have them, but I also want them to be well protected without bent edges, without stains. And then I want you to put a little thought into your card, and I'll just share as an example my card here, that I'm really thinking about what goes into my business card. I met a DJ one time and his card was vinyl, and I thought that was so cool. So put a little bit of thought into your card. It's not out of style to do so. And remember that it is a tangible representation of you that you're offering someone else. A trendier thing now is to kind of do the moo cards or these very small square cards. Just think about that someone, you don't want them to lose it, right? So making sure that it's not so small or it looks like a token or a quarter, and then they can't find it later on when they really want to get in touch. Think of a business card as it's better to receive than to give. Because if I have your card, I have your information, and I'm able to reach out. I give my card to someone else, they may take it, throw their gum in it, and put it in the trash. So having someone else's card really gives you a bit of power and leverage in that situation. And just do not write or deface. I know a lot of people like to take notes on business cards, and I think that's a great idea, right? After I've met someone, I might write a little description or what they do or anything like that on the card, but you just don't want to do it in front of them. Just thinking of that as part of them, and so you wouldn't want to write on it in front of them. And a big pet peeve of mine is not having the correct information on your card. Your number changes, right? Anything changes on your card. It needs to be updated. It shouldn't have a little scratch out and you writing in something on the back, or let me, give you this other information. Give people the best way to reach you on your business card printed. And in the line of what's still in and out of style, also know that thank you cards are still in style, at least to me. Now, Wilson, the philosopher. Many of us may remember him from Home Improvement with his words of wisdom. In the office space, please don't be a prairie dog. Please don't be a Wilson who's reaching over someone's cubicle. Many of us are in a cubicle space, but some of us are also in offices as well. And so making sure that you're getting someone's attention properly if you need to engage them, as opposed to kind of prairie dogging over, especially if someone is in conversation with someone else. Also stepping into someone's cubicle space, like this is all we get in life sometimes, right? Is this one little space. So really acknowledging that I think is important, and respecting someone's space or their office space, and the fact that they may be in conversation or maybe working on something, and asking, is now a good time, is a great way to approach people. I noticed another thing with our younger generations is that they'll send over an email and then 2 seconds later, they're kind of prairie dogging, hey, did you get it? I'm like, yeah, I got your email, but I haven't had a chance to check it out yet. And there is that expectation of some type of immediate response. So being aware of that, it might be something that you experience with a generation other than yours. All right, I see that we have a few questions in. Are handwritten thank you cards needed? How about an email? Is that okay? So For me, you can absolutely thank someone via email, right? But what does it say to get mail that's not a bill nowadays? And so writing someone a thank you card, something that very often whenever I get thank you cards, I'm propping them up on my desk. So that's a great way for someone to remember you. Rarely will someone print out an email to remember your thank you, but a thank you card will remain present. And so I think that's the difference, and that's why it's still okay to send a thank you card and not feel like you're old fogey doing so. And certainly for those that are out there and interviewing, it will definitely set you apart from the candidates that you're up against.
There's another question from Tatiana about business cards. If we could circle back to that
Yes.
for a moment.
Sorry, Tatiana. What are your thoughts on personal business cards if we do not have control over the contact info? So I guess maybe are we thinking that your work information is on the cards? Is that what we're thinking, Tatiana?
Yes.
Okay, sure. I still say that's a perfect way to reach out to someone. For me, I have business thank you notes, and then I also have just personal letterhead as well, so that if I need to go in between and I don't want to seem too formal with someone that I'm socially connected with, then I'll send that personal card. But a business one still says something, and I think it's a great representation of you. Yes. And you can even get, so you don't have to spend, hundreds and hundreds on having everything monogrammed. You can easily, as it's mentioned here by Stephen, go into the store and just have your initial or monogram on a card. And I think that's very nice too and personalized. Awesome. All right. So I was watching earlier this amazing YouTube video of all of the wild and crazy handshakes of our dear president. And know that your first impression says a lot, and the way that we actually shake hands. There should be a little bit of lean in. Of course, you don't want to bend someone else's arm or wrist. And I think what we'll find with a number of the handshakes, the unique handshakes that we've seen from President Trump, is that sometimes it can be a bit demeaning in that either there's that politician pat on the shoulder kind of handshake or pat on the hand. Even in this particular instance, there was a pat on the hand. And so while I might do that, with the 80-year-old lady at church, I would not do that in a professional setting. And so being very, very aware. It's also not like you're at the state fair, right? And you're trying to win a prize by breaking someone's arm. So keep that in mind. We definitely want to show strength in our handshakes, but it's not a competition out there. I'll also mention to my gentlemen, give us a firm handshake. We ladies, we can take it. Don't feel like you have to kind of give us that 80-year-old lady of the church handshake. All right. Now we have 3 to 7 seconds, to make a great first impression with someone. So not a lot of time. That handshake really means a lot. Making sure you're pronouncing your name nice and loud and clear so that it is memorable for individuals. And then we'll talk about some of the other aspects of working the room and networking. Now, a friend of mine recently on a Sunday night invited me to the Embassy of Finland. I was completely excited about it. I'm like, sure, I'm there, I have a dress. Don't ask a whole lot of questions, and she tells me it's tomorrow night. I'm like, I'm good, I'll be there. I show up to the embassy, and I look around the room, and I realize that Bob Dole is there, a lot of organizations and companies that I would really want to be engaged with. Had I simply said, Tricia, who's going to be in the room? I would have had a better idea. Not that I was going to, chat it up with Bob Dole, but as I mentioned, there were a number of individuals that were there that I would like to be connected with. And so that would have given me an opportunity to do my favorite pastime, which is stalking. Well, no, not stalking, but LinkedIn stalking, and really taking a moment to learn more about the individuals and their organizations that are going to be there. It's not so that I can say, I see that you live at 3614, 10th Street, right? Because that will creep someone out. But I might realize, because people do share a good deal of information via social media and especially LinkedIn, that they're into kayaking or they went to a particular university. And so those are maybe conversations that I will want to migrate to as we're talking. And so not to creep people out, but certainly you have a better idea of what's comfortable for this person to talk about. So that's me doing my homework and knowing who's in the room. But I'm also thinking about avoiding crutches, and there are so many crutches that we can depend on. Our cell phones are one. Have you ever been to a networking event and you see that person in the corner on their phone, and I'm sure they're, saving the world via Candy Crush? Really, they're uncomfortable with talking with someone or stepping into the space. And so try to avoid that as a crutch of being on our phone. For many, it's a comfort zone, it's a security blanket, and so one of those crutches. Food can also be a crutch, right? It gives us an activity to do. And I'll tell the story. A gentleman I was dating, we were invited to a wedding, and all of the servers in the room were walking around with these trays of like a green kind of liquid in a shooter glass. And I'm like, this is fascinating. But I have a rule for networking events, and this was like the networking hour, I guess, of the wedding, the cocktail hour. And I'm not going to eat because I know that there's going to be a dinner. I'd rather be networking with people. And so I see him, he takes that little shooter glass, that green glass, and chucks it back. And what is it but hot pea soup? First of all, I don't know who serves, hot pea soup and shooter glasses at weddings, but it was hilarious to see him chuck that back and to think about that nowadays too. Makes me laugh. It's always going to be something that sets you up at a networking event. It's never going to be, easy finger food. It's something that you have to build or dissect. Stay away from the food if you can and really focus on the people when you are at a networking event. Otherwise, it is a crutch for us. Alcohol, of course, aren't we all better networkers after 3 or 4 drinks, I imagine? I know I am. So don't use alcohol as a crutch. It's easy to do, but I also want to think about going in between maybe, beer or wine and then mixing in water as well. Now, pause for effect sounds a little bit odd, but it's something I like to do before I walk into a space. Recently, I was at an event and it was an afternoon tea, but about 500 women were at this event. Overwhelming, to say the least. And so before I walked into that room, right when I stepped in, I took a breath and I took a survey. And you do want to know, well, where's the food and where's the bar and where are the people? Do I see any familiar faces? All of those things can kind of help you before you just dive into a space and you almost get overwhelmed. So take a moment, pause for effect, and just do a bit of a survey of that room. In addition, I'm thinking about breaking and entering. Right? Oh, sounds devious. Now, for some of us, we're not comfortable with talking to someone just one-on-one. We'd rather talk to a group of people, and that's fine. If you see a group, I want you to break and enter. Make eye contact with one person and introduce yourself, and they will welcome you into that group and into that conversation. Not for you to jump in and change the conversation, but to take a moment and listen and then jump in as needed. Now, if I'm also trying to get out of that conversation, all you have to do when you're with a group is to simply touch someone on the shoulder and say, please excuse me, and you can wander off quite easily from a group conversation. We'll find that sometimes, though, there are 2 individuals that are at an event and they are just really engrossed in conversation. Most likely, they're each other's crutch. Most likely, they came together and will not leave each other for the entire event. And so it's nothing wrong with you going up and talking with 2 people, but a lot of times they are talking shop or it's difficult to break that barrier. And so just keep that in mind. I'm still happy to talk to 2 people because I figure I'm doing them a favor as well. Okay. Now, not many of us are great at making a graceful exit from conversation, and it's a question that I get a lot. I'm going to ask you to be a connector. That's a great way to kind of ease out of a conversation. So either I want to be that Paul Revere, I want to build my network and be a wonderful networker. I'm going to connect you with someone else in this space. And it may be something simple that I know the 2 of you love the same sports team and I want to make the introduction. It may be that you're in the same field or can benefit one another. So I'll try to make that connection. It's a good way for you to walk someone over to someone else and then make the introduction and step away. Because a lot of times we do get stuck in conversation for a while. Another thing that I will encourage you to do is to meet the host. And not at the end when you're leaving and saying goodbye, but meet that host at the beginning of the event. Or as I mentioned before with my scenario at the Embassy of Finland, I could have said, Trisha, make sure that you're introducing me to, individuals in here, right? Or I'm really looking for someone here from Sister Cities, or whatever organization it might be. And so Do that with your host. Talk to them up front and early or even before your event and let them know that you would like to be connected with someone, and they'll make it happen for you. So those are some of the ways to make a graceful exit, but sometimes you just need to be a little more direct with someone or to let them know it was really a pleasure meeting them and you'd love to keep in touch and you exchange information that way. I just want to encourage you to avoid saying, I think I have to go to the restroom, or I think I'll have another drink, because that person too has to go to the restroom and wants another drink. You'll never lose them. As we talked about, exchanging information is important, but even more so is the follow-up. And I try to do it within 24 hours of meeting someone. While there's still warm and fuzzy feelings, I'm fresh on their mind, and the event is still fresh on their mind. You're also doing that to be able to leave a bit of a breadcrumb trail, right? So that if I do need to reach out for something 3 or 6 months from now, we've had contact and I'm not just reaching out of the blue from a card that I found. And then just a bit on my favorite topic, which is netiquette and technology etiquette. Now, building up firewalls, I was talking with a group of professionals, and they were telling me, because I always am interested in unique workspaces and how different organizations kind of mesh and meld. And they were telling me that a lot of them will put earbuds in or even earplugs to keep others from talking to them while they're at work. And one lady told me she was not even listening to anything. She just had them in so that people would not distract her. I get that. I get that we're very often in a bullpen or a loud business setting. I've definitely been in an office space where Nerf wars were the thing to do every afternoon, and you really did need a way to kind of block everything out. But just know that you're blocking people and that you come off as not approachable when you're constantly either having your earbuds in or tuning out in that way. It comes off as tuning out. And remember, again, we're talking generationally. For me, when I look at a group of young people and I see all of the earbuds around their neck, I'm like, they're about to put those in. They're about to be tuned out. And so that's what it can say to individuals when we do have our earplugs in or our headsets. I also don't want you to become a meme, okay? And I'm thinking about the recent incident at Harvard University where 10 students, their admission was rescinded due to things that they were sharing via social media. And so understanding, and you may lean either way with the results there in the free speech issues, but for me, I'm thinking about who am I representing, right? Not just myself typically, but an organization. And so it may differ, your opinions may differ, and you may have views that are different than your organization, but being aware that if we're posting those things on social media, the effects that may play out. And I'm sure we've all heard stories of that happening to individuals. I think the election cycle was a big time where we saw so much online with political memes, political statements, and articles that were shared. And it may have changed your views of some people. And for many, we had to either block people or kind of go mute or step away from all of that news and information. And so being careful about what we're putting out there, what we're sharing, and even liking on social media can say so much about us. Responding in kind is important to me, again, thinking generationally that not everyone prefers to talk by phone, right? And I remember growing up that if I had a day out of school, my girlfriends and I, we would be on the phone the entire day. We would not get off the phone the entire day, the house phone, right? Nowadays, you couldn't get me on the phone for more than 10 minutes, right? And I'm very, very antsy. And so I have to be aware that while the phone now is not my thing, many of my clients will expect phone conversations. There are some people, though, that I work with, and I've never talked to them, and everything is done over email. And so making sure that you are meeting your client where they prefer to communicate. And then finally, thinking about your corporate use policies. What's the policy at your organization, and do you know with regards to the internet and how you're using it and the time that is spent there? And you shared earlier, that the percentage of individuals that said their work is slacking off just due to the election cycle and politics. is your work slacking off, or are you really distracted by all of the technology that's before you? And so, just one more thing to think about today: your corporate use policy. Oh, awesome! So we have a few questions here. Let's see. Do I have 2 or 3 books that you might recommend on these subjects? I will offer you one now, and then maybe we can share others because I know Eliza said we'll be able to send things out. But one is Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office, one of my absolute favorite books, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. But it talks so much about how our body language and our executive presence can build our credibility or take away from it. So simple things such as, pulling at your hair, constantly adjusting yourself, taking away from credibility when I'm meeting someone for the first time and talking with them. And so one of my favorite books, but I'll make sure that we share out 2 or 3 more for you that are great on this topic. Thanks. Am I missing anything else?
There are a couple of questions that circle back to the topic of business cards.
Yes.
And one is whether or not you recommend personal cards if you're between jobs, and other than the obvious contact information, what else might you recommend beyond that card, such as a keyword or a field? So, how much of your resume can you put on a card?
All right, that's a good one. Let's not overwhelm people with our business cards. I don't want you to have a lot on there. The best phone number to reach you. I want to share the best email to reach you. Nowadays, some people may put their social media handle on it. I think it's industry specific. Fax number may be important for people to have, even now in 2017. I know if I'm doing contracts a lot with someone, I'm always trying to find their fax number, so a fax number may be good to have on your business card. And then your title in the company or organization that you're with. Other than that, quotes, little additional things I would keep off. And it's almost like that signature line in the email. I had someone email me and they had 6 quotes at the bottom of their email. Bizarre, just bizarre. I guess maybe they were trying to empower people, but for me, it's simply a distraction. So you want to make sure that people are keyed into the best way to reach and contact you. And you can really lead and tailor the way that people reach out to you and what you're most comfortable with. Okay. If you're not currently working, should you put your field? So for me, if I don't have an organization card, I also have a social card, and it just has my information and my contact info. And I think it's a personal choice if you'd like to put your field in it, if it's something that's really unique or something that's going to, spark someone's mind. And certainly if you're out there job hunting, then maybe you do want to include that. But I think what will be more powerful as you are looking for a job, or if you are looking for a job, is receiving that other person's card and having their contact information as well. So a personal choice, but for me, I would say that there's no need to put the actual field that you're in on your card if it's not a company card. Thank you. Good. All right, well, we're on questions as we are, so if you have any more, please feel free. And I did have a great question that came in. Let's see here. And that was from some of the questions we received earlier from Brad E. Turner. He's the CEO of Heartland. And his first question was, if your client orders alcohol, is it fine for you to do so? So unfortunately, much to my chagrin, the days of the Mad Men days of the 3 martini lunch are gone, right? But there are a lot of times when I want a client to feel comfortable. And for me, if I'm doing a business etiquette luncheon, for example, I typically would not want to drink while I'm trying to talk. It just doesn't go well. But I might want my client to feel comfortable. And so either I'll have a small pour of something or a glass of something and just not touch it because I want them to feel comfortable with that experience. And so if my client has ordered something, I want them to feel comfortable. And if I do drink, right, I'm going to go ahead and grab a beverage. It's also the idea of if your client orders a cheeseburger, then it's okay for you to order a cheeseburger. You want that person to feel comfortable. You don't want to then order something that is, so extravagant that then they feel kind of silly ordering the burger. And a lot of times I'll even, if I'm out dining with someone, say, well, I'll have what he's having or I'll have what she's having. And it really is saying to that person that I have a bit of buy-in with them, that they have good thoughts and ideas and I'm rolling along with them. And so I'll even use that sometimes to say, I'll have what he's having. All right. And then the second question that we had from Brad Turner of Heartland is that if you notice that your client, or anyone else for that matter, has a wardrobe malfunction, should you let them know? And my question is, well, wouldn't you want to know? I definitely do. So if you see something wrong with me, the thing that I'm infamous for is not getting the last little bit of my zipper in the back of my dress. And so if you notice that with me, please, please let me know. Sometimes I'll go through half the day and realize it. And so I'm like, why didn't anyone tell me? We want to know that we have spinach in our teeth. We want to know those little things. Unless it's something that cannot be changed. And I'll recall a time of having on nylons, having on stockings. And really, once you're at a point with a run, there's nothing that you can do about it. And so I had a gentleman point, oh, you have a run. Well, it's nothing I can really do about it. Right, spinach I can fix, the zipper I can fix. If it's something that's fixable, but pointing out a stain to someone or something that's not fixable, I don't think is the way to go. Okay.
A couple more questions that have come in, Crystal, from Bruce Williams.
Okay.
In a networking session, when you want to speak to a particular person who's engaged with one or more persons, do you stand in until he or she is finished, or you circle back? I think that's always a question. How do you break in? You touched on it earlier, but how do you break in or get out of those social groups?
Yes. So the awkward thing of like creating a line around the one person that everyone wants to talk to is not good at all. And so circling back is the way to do it. Getting the eye contact of that person at some point, and it may even be that you're saving them at times. And so if they are talking to someone and they've been talking for a while, it might be that you do want to step up and make eye contact, introduce yourself, and start the conversation that way. And not to say that you are kicking that other person out, but I might want to say, oh, I just wanted to touch base before I head out of here or something like that. And acknowledging that other person that they're speaking with is important as well, introducing yourself to that person. So it's not like you're kind of, kicking the other person away, but almost welcoming yourself into that group, I think is perfectly fine. Just be aware of, I've seen definitely at networking events, like a weird line that's building up around someone, and that gets awkward.
Talbot Kennedy has another, it's more of a statement than a question, yes. But someone who was rather rude on an elevator, pushing someone away, and then the other person watching had a priceless look on his face, which sort of reminds me of the whole business etiquette of, how do you treat the waitress? I think people yes. watch how you treat other people, and that reflects on you in a business situation. Perhaps you can touch on that a little bit.
Okay. So I'm going to just read out for us. So the younger one pushed me out of the way and kept talking to the obviously senior man with him. The senior one stopped, held the door, and pushed my floor. The look on his face was priceless. I love that. There are a lot of times that we have to overcome someone else's shortcomings. I recently had an email exchange where a client of mine had, and this is just a weird story, but they tried to recall an email that was sent to me. And I didn't really pay much attention to it, but I said the day before the event, let me go back and make sure I'm reading through everything. And I read through and I realized why they tried to recall the message is because there was this internal conversation about me that was not the nicest. And so in realizing that, being very, very careful about how we treat others, even when we think that they would never know what we've said or never see what we've said or have experienced that. But for me, it shed light on every conversation, everything that I say, even if it's an email or even face-to-face with someone, can get back to an individual. And so really thinking about the way that we are treating people, I think, is a big part of that. And I think they kind of had egg on their face, too. That book was, I'm sure, priceless when they realized that I had received that email. Great questions. Thanks, Talbot. All right.
So what are some of the other things that come up that you hear often? And one of the things that I'm aware is that you work with a lot of clients when they're going overseas. We don't have any questions about that yet, but if you have, and I'm putting you on the spot, for which I apologize, speaking of how you treat people. But what are some of the sort of common themes when somebody is getting ready to do some international business travel?
So for me, every country you go to is different. There will be different cultural expectations and norms, and we have to be so heightened. Our awareness has to be heightened around them. And what we'll do is actually share out a great link. So if you're traveling somewhere or if you are overseas, to think about what are some things in that country that might be particular in business etiquette and in fine dining etiquette, because I think those are two things that are brought up. I had a good girlfriend of mine who's over in London, and she's been there for a few years now. She reached out to me and she said, well, do I teach the American style or the continental style of dining? And I said, well, I really try to teach the continental style just because the way our society is now, we're so global, I think it's important. And she said that every time that she goes to dinner with her colleagues and her superiors, she feels like the American girl, who's eating wrong, and they're looking at her funny. And so it's almost that when in Rome thing that I want to make sure that I'm, in some sense, assimilating to the culture that I'm in and not kind of going against, especially if it's going to look as if I'm not doing the correct thing.
We have two more questions that have come in, one from Donna Flick. She needs to use earbuds at work. There's a lot of detailed work in a loud setting. So how does she avoid the tune-out perception?
Yes. I've even heard of people putting up a little sign, to let people know if you need anything, tap me on the shoulder or something like that. So there would be nothing wrong with that. Also, for me, I try to keep just one in and one out so that I have an awareness of what's going on. It's nothing worse than someone kind of tapping you on your back and you having that shocked, surprised feeling. But even if you want to resort to a cute little sign at your desk to let people know that you are available to them, I think that might be important because technology really can build up that firewall that we talked about. Great question.
I'm reading Bruce Williams' question. I think he's talking about how do you deal with those, you respond all. In responding or sending an email, I've received emails that have everyone's email. They're sending or responding to exposed. What is the proper net protocol?
BCC, right? So BCC, when you're emailing large groups, and that's blind carbon copy as opposed to CC, which is carbon copy, is so important to use. Not everyone wants their information out there. Not everyone wants to be on a reply all, and so BCC will prevent that. There are underhanded ways to use BCC, and I would encourage us to stay away from those, though, in a business setting. So having one person on the BCC kind of lurking in the background of an email is not my suggestion. I would either forward that email to the person or include them on the CC line, as opposed to having them lurking or lingering in the back. That's a little bit weird. But when you are working with large groups of people, 25, 50 people, and you don't want a reply all, these are usually emails that we're saying hello all or good afternoon to everyone. It's not to a specific person. Then I want to use that BCC line. Excellent.
The open setting in earbuds continues to be a question. So, and this is an interesting one, even if you have a sign up. But what if you're working with on something that is an urgent deliverable? So, you really, the setting is open, but you really need to be allowed to attend to it and not be distracted. How do you manage that and not come across as having thrown up a wall?
So if that's the case and you really are working on something and you need to block out the world, then I'm taking one earbud out, and this is really to let people know that I'm not able to engage with you right now, and that's saying, please forgive me. I'm trying to get through this, right? And then I'm going to change my body language back to the computer and not give them too much body language, and individuals will typically get the message that way. But just letting them know that you have a tight deadline, please forgive me. Can I circle back with you a little bit later?
I think that might be another place, as you said before, a little sign saying urgent deadline, be done at such and such a time, or something of that sort. We did just get a question asking if the presentation will be available. Yes, it will. Yes. We will send that out. Thank you, Crystal, for allowing that. And if you have other questions, of course, that we don't get to, we can attend to them after the session. It is 12:59. As those of you who attend these often know, we end promptly at 1. So while we're waiting for a couple of questions, I would like to thank Crystal Bailey for participating, for letting us drag her over from the law school, and for everything she does for our current students. And as I always mention, I also want to thank Karen Connor, who is in the room with us, making the technology hum as she always does, as well as Mike, and for my team who are in the background responding to emails that came in as we were beginning. So thank you, everyone who makes these sessions go so smoothly. But mostly, again, thank you, Crystal. And we will send out links that Crystal mentioned, as well as other suggested books. You have closing thoughts?
All right, good stuff. Do you have the X Factor? I believe that you do. Thank you all so much for today. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. I am here and available at your beck and call.
We have one quick question from Bruce Williams.
Yes.
What would be the proper number of attempts to contact a prospect before you are perceived as a nuisance?
Oh my
That's
goodness.
really interesting.
I think almost 3. And a great tool for you to use is Boomerang. It's an add-on to Gmail, and it reminds me, and I can set it to remind me in a week to get back with someone, or 2 weeks, whatever time I set. And Boomerang will allow you to remember to reach back to that person, because you don't want to lose your lead, right? But I think after 3 times, we kind of get the idea.
Thank you. Thank you for your great questions, everyone, and for joining us. And thank you, Crystal, and we will be talking again soon. Take good care.
Thank you.